I want to welcome Steve Penny. He is the publisher of the free Silver Chartist newsletter and opens up his portfolio, which has a lot of uranium stocks, up 10x at this point, to some subscribers, all of which you can find at the silverchartistnation.com. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, Elliot, thanks so much for having me back on.
No, I'm very excited to have you back on because it's rare in financial markets for predictions to come true like this, right? Normally it could take years and years and years, and the timing is always off, but you just absolutely nailed this uranium trade. And you were up with 300% in a bunch of stocks before this move even happened. So it's like your timing has just been really great. So to give a little background and context, do you mind kind of walking us through your journey and how your portfolio got this profitable?
Sure. So to be honest, with uranium specifically, I got to admit there's always a little bit of good fortune involved with that and with luck, having the cash available when the opportunity presents itself. But uranium caught my eye back in 2011 after the Fukushima disaster, when the world swore off nuclear. We're never going to use nuclear power again. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but that was the sentiment at the time. But these mining stocks continued to produce uranium, increasing the supply as demand is going down. So as a contrarian, that immediately caught my attention. That's when I began researching uranium. But it really wasn't until March of 2020, on that panic-driven COVID sell-off, that these things just got ridiculously cheap. I mean, I had a small position leading up to that, but at that time, I happened to have a decent cash position, and those things were, it's hard to imagine something being a better value proposition than uranium miners back in March of 2020. So that's where I was able to accumulate a lot of positions.
Right, exactly. So that was just an absolutely brilliant entry point. So, if you have been following your portfolio along, even a month ago, you could see that you're up 300%. I think you were in Denison Mines at 41 cents or something.
It's my average cost basis. Yeah.
Right. Really, really low cost basis in these. And so you were up big already. And now this epic move just happened. So I guess between your entry point in March 20 and this big run up, were you making any trades along the way?
A little bit. And just to fully answer the first question, back in March 2020, I like to study a lot of ratios, and, I'm into silver, uranium, and gold, and that includes physical silver and gold. And I saw, while I'm super bullish on gold on a ratio basis, the mining stocks were so cheap relative to gold. So I had just liquidated some of my physical gold, and that freed up cash to speculate in mining stocks. So that's just an example of why ratios are so powerful. But as far as have I traded in along the way? Yeah, I'm a big advocate for getting your initial capital off the table at some point. So at this point, I've taken my initial investment out of the uranium sector, and I did that over multiple sales that I sent out to our members, selling into strength. But I think there's still a lot more to go in this bull market. So I still have the vast majority of my positions.
Yeah, and what I've noticed about your updates, the alerts you send out, like you're buying when there's just peak bearishness. Like, I think you made a position in Camco when it was very, very low. I mean, people were hitting the uranium market literally right before this happened. I think it was peak bearishness, and you were still buying. So could you just talk a little bit about that? Because that is probably the most important rule in investing and trading, just buying when like no one else wants it.
Yeah. And for me, that's pretty easy. I think a lot of your listeners are probably contrarian by nature. Right. But the harder part is to sell when everyone is euphoric. And that's probably when I get the most criticism, is when I take just a little bit off the table when things get kind of euphoric. So that's my style. And I like to use technical charts to identify support and resistance, to, not just sell when things feel euphoric, but on predefined levels on the chart.
Yeah, that's right. And it's worked out extremely well. So now at this point, if I had to guess, most of the audience didn't have as big of a position in uranium as they would have wanted before this move. So the big question now is, like, what can investors do, right? So what are you actually doing at this point while we're way up here?
Yep. Yeah, that's such a good question. I do still think it's early innings in terms of price, but in terms of time, I think the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust has accelerated this bull market, and it's probably shortened the duration. I think it's going to happen faster, very likely. So we are due for a pullback here. And I think that's probably going to happen pretty soon. I mean, saying it's going to happen tomorrow, that might be a little bit, I'm not going to stick my neck out that far, but we're due for a pullback. I think the next sharp pullback will probably be the last time to get in at really good entry points. Once it goes up to 60, 70 and pulls back to 50, I mean, I think you could still make money off of that, but it's just not going to be the contrarian trade that it is, right now on the next pullback.
Well, at this point, it definitely won't be contrarian, right? Because as soon as you have really big bullish moves, I think I was on Wall Street Bets actually already, and they're already putting memes out about uranium.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
here we go.
Last week when this started, I put out 3 scenarios to our members. Right as a lot of the stocks and the ETFs, I like to use the URNM ETF. It's my favorite ETF to track the space. Right as it came up to its previous all-time high, I laid out 3 scenarios. We could consolidate below resistance and then punch through it, which would actually be the healthiest. Or you could break out, run up, and then come back and back test it. Whenever you get a major breakout, you typically come back and back test it. So that's what happened. What's happened so far is we ran way above that resistance. We're extremely stretched now. So it'd be technically ideal for us to come back and back test the breakout levels. And you could apply that same logic to most of the individual stocks. And then the third option, which we really don't want to see, although it might be exciting for some, is for these Wall Street Bets people to come in and just make this thing go parabolic. That might be fun, but it's going to benefit the least number of retail participants if that happens. And it's the hardest to make money on those kind of parabolic moves because it happens so fast and it's like a deer in the headlights. That's how most retail people react to those kind of run-ups. So I hope that does not happen. It's possible. All the ingredients are in place for that to happen. But as far as like right now, today, I would not chase here. I'd wait for a pullback.
Yeah, exactly. And you've been really disciplined about that. I think you're actually sent out an alert saying that you're taking a little small amount of profit off the table because you're contrarian by nature and you do not chase things while they're high. You like buying things, the deep red, which you've already done clearly. Right.
Yeah. And there's tax considerations too. So the simplest way to hedge is just take some profit. You could do that. You could also buy the problem for a lot of people is that creates a taxable event. And it's always good to try and preserve that long-term capital gains treatment if that applies to you. I don't want to get into individual tax situations, but it applies to a lot of people. So, this might be a good place to hedge if you don't want to sell any long-term positions. But yeah, I've gotten now my initial investment off the table. So it's whatever happens here is a free ride for me.
Right. So we could either get a nice healthy pullback and it could be a nice structured bull market where you can buy in on the dips and just have it continue going up, or it could be this absolute parabolic move that goes straight up and then falls back to earth, right?
Yep.
So the fundamentals that got you into this trade, right? The supply demand, how they're producing just not enough to meet the current supply and future supply, and they're going to need to put in a lot more investment into the space to meet that. I mean, the most important thing is the supply demand fundamentals. So when will that kind of equalize? When will supply maybe exceed demand, causing a crash like we've seen before, right? Because this trade could have a lot of legs for months and or years, right?
Yeah, it sure could. So roughly, let's just call it $60, $65 uranium is enough for a lot of these mines to come online. And eventually over time, the supply demand fundamentals would reach an equilibrium at that price, but it would take a long time. So price is very likely. I mean, I think it's highly likely to overshoot that $65 target, because it takes time for these mines to come online. Like even if Cameco said, hey, we're going to restart, our McArthur River mine, that's going to be 18 months out for this new supply to start coming online. So especially if the Sprott Physical Uranium Trust continues to accumulate physical pounds, that supply demand situation is nowhere near being resolved at current prices.
Wow. So that's just so incredibly exciting. So everything that's causing this parabolic move is in place, and it's going to continue until some sort of, until the supply can meet the demand. And that it will take many months, right? It has to.
Yeah. It's going to take a couple of years. Exactly. Yeah. I think there's probably a couple of years left of this bull market, at least.
Okay. So it's definitely early, you would say.
Yeah. It's not inning number 1 anymore. It's probably, more like inning 3. So I think, but like I said, I just want to reiterate, I think the next sharp pullback will be probably the last time to get in and for this to be a contrarian trade, if and when there's another sharp pullback, which I do expect. And by the way, I want to just kind of draw a parallel here to silver investors. A lot of silver investors, their sentiment is just down the tube. And I want to remind silver investors that for a long time, it was difficult to be a uranium investor. We were wrong for a couple of years, and many people threw in the towel on their uranium miners. but now they're being rewarded for that. And I think the same thing is going to happen for silver investors.
Exactly. That is such an important point, right? Because if this interview was about silver, it wouldn't get as many clicks as
Right.
about uranium at this point. So let's talk about. I mean, okay, I think we covered uranium, right? We covered how the bullish activity in the spot prices is going to continue, and it's going to take months, if not years, for the supply to actually meet the demand. And so, pretty much buy on healthy dips at this point, right? Is
Exactly.
advice. Great. And we'll definitely follow along with you because you send out great alerts on your timing. So we'll be excited about that. So, but then moving on to silver, obviously very depressed. What is your position on kind of the technicals there?
Well, without getting too specific, I mean, there's a couple of trend lines I'm watching, but let's just call it $22 silver. It's actually a few pennies above that. There's the lower rail of this gently sloping uptrend channel is roughly $22, and it's slightly upsloping. So I think there's a very good probability we backtest $22, maybe slightly over 50-50. I'm totally mentally prepared for that. And then an outside possibility that we pull back towards even 19. Now, that would be painful in the short term, but I think that would actually be bullish for the longer term because we just haven't seen that capitulative selling, that final just gut-wrenching sell-off that marks a bottom. And if we've seen the lows so far, it's more likely to take a little bit of time to recover. Whereas if you just see a spike low, you can see a spike back up. So I'd almost like to see that. And of course, what's driving the monetary metals right now is talk of taper and Fed tightening and tightening monetary conditions. So it remains to be seen. A lot of people say, oh, there's no way they can taper. I don't think they will, but I think there's a real enough possibility that they might try it. And if that happens, that could cause that big capitulation sell-off in the metals. And that would be our last really good buying opportunity from my perspective.
That's absolutely correct. I've talked to people who believe that there will be kind of a deflationary event like that, which will trigger the Fed to bring in even more stimulus, which is absolutely what they need to do, whether or not they want to admit it. So I agree, right? So the precious metals are being held down currently, and they could even go lower based on like what we're talking about. The Fed, I mean, the stock market hasn't budged. It's just an absolute straight line, like perfect trend up. That's going to have to correct for the Fed to bring in more stimulus, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, 100%. For us silver investors, we could look at this market and say, we see all the bullish catalysts, but we need to look at these markets through the eyes of the general market participants. They're watching CNBC and Fox Business all day long. They don't know the things that we know. So until the general market kind of recognizes the situation we're in and that more monetary stimulus is coming, it's just a matter of when. I think the metals, are likely to, they could trend higher, but the next catalyst is going to be when the general market participants recognize that more monetary stimulus is coming.
In order for that to be triggered, it's going to be a big market sell-off, and silver and gold miners probably won't do too hot in that environment. So there could even be another opportunity, but it seems like you're very excited about silver at this point, right?
I am. I love these kind of sell-offs. I mean, I think we're clearly in the accumulation zone. I'm keeping that little bit of cash available in case we do see just one of those big panic-driven sell-offs, which is possible. But another scenario here, I don't want to make it sound like that's the most, like that scenario is written in stone. Another scenario here is right now, the market is expecting taper. Well, they could reverse course before they actually do it. We could get, more bad jobs numbers, more economic data that's poor, and they could just abandon it before they even start it. In which case, we've likely seen the lows in the metals.
So you're really seeing an early stage opportunity in the metals, and then uranium, you're just kind of letting your positions ride and being tactical around it, right?
Yeah, and that's the advantage of getting in early. And this applies to silver investors now. Is with uranium, I've kind of got it set, and I can, I'm not chasing. I'm just managing what I have. But if I didn't have that full position, I'd be looking to add on the next dip.
What are some stocks that people should probably do more research on that kind of excite you in the uranium space? Obviously not financial advice, but are there any that could have some value or that you're watching potentially?
Sure. There's about 65 pure play uranium miners in the world, which is a really small number. That's globally. And most of them are explorers and developers. So we've narrowed it down to 10. I own, I think, 10 that I really like. So out of respect for the, our premium members, I don't want to give them all away, but I'll just say one that I like is Uranium Royalty Corp. And, that was one I wasn't too big of a fan on in the beginning, but they recently signed a deal to have a a royalty on Cigar Lake and MacArthur River. So what I like about that is eventually MacArthur River is going to come back online. It's the biggest uranium mine in the world. Well, that'll be a bearish development for the sector, but it'll be a bullish development for Uranium Royalty Corp because they've got a royalty on it. So it's kind of like a hedge. So that's one I really like.
And just looking at your portfolio, that's great that you kind of narrowed it down to 10, and it seems like your worst position is 70% up, which is amazing. So really looking forward to follow along with how you play, the silver market, the gold market, the uranium market going forward. But I think I agree with you. It's still relatively early in uranium. You're right, because the fundamental drivers that cause this have not gone anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and it's early as far as price, but the time has been compressed. So this could unfold faster than we had originally anticipated.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, but I really appreciate you mentioning the free newsletter. It goes out every week. It's a free weekly chart pack, and our goal is to provide a ton of value for free. And then we do have a low ticket premium option, but there's never any pressure to upgrade to that. But we did create a special link just for your listeners who wants to try out that free newsletter, and it's silverchartistnation.com.
This discussion is for informational purposes only. Nothing in this discussion should be taken as investment advice. Guests are not compensated for their appearance. Do not base any investment decisions on the information presented.